One method for interacting with an LLM that I find really useful is to prime it for a particular type of behavior using your prompt. Now what this means that instead of the prompt just saying something like generate code that does whatever, you can also have the prompt look more like you are an expert in clear, well-engineered code in Python. Please generate code that does whatever, and then output it with line-by-line comments. So then when you have that prompt for your code that does whatever you want it to do, you can then embed that within that master prompt, and it can give you much better performance. Shall we look at an example? So in this lesson, we're going to look at how you can use templating of your strings to make your prompts a little bit more powerful. But before we get to that, we got to reinstall all of our dependencies. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to copy in, of course, where we imported the API key and we set up Palm with that API key. So let's run that, let it do its thing. The second thing that we're going to do is when we go through the models that are supported by Palm, we want to pick the ones that generated text. And that was going to be model Bison. And we just want to make sure that we got it, and we do. It's text Bison 001. And then finally, the generate text helper function that we had in the previous lesson, we'll just paste that in here as well, and that just makes it easier for us to be able to send stuff to the backend, to the Palm backend, and pass in our parameters. And for example, do things like change the temperature from the default 0.7 to 0.0. Okay, so now let's take a look at how we're going to template the string that I was talking about. So the goal here is I always like to think about my prompt as being really made up of three different things. The first thing that's going to be in the prompt is what I call the priming of the prompt. It's a little bit like when you prime a wall when you're painting it, right? It's you're getting your prompt ready, you're designing it for what the thing is going to do. The second part of the prompt is the question. It's typically what we call the prompt. It's what we were doing earlier on, is like, give me a linked list in Python or show me how to do something. And then the final part is what I like to call the decorator, not to be confused with Python decorators. And this is like those final instructions that you're going to give the model and how to deal with the outputs. Like, for example, give me things line by line, or give me a comment on every line, or something like that. So let's look at an example like priming text like this. I'm just going to say you're an expert at writing clear, concise Python code. So I'm priming the model to understand that it's going to be doing something like that. And now I'll do my question. So maybe my question will be something like, we can do just something very simple like create a doubly linked list. Very simple, and hopefully it'll go well. And then finally is the decorator, and like the decorator might be, I want to, instead of just spitting out code, I want it to be able to do something useful and help me to explain it a little bit better. So for example, work through it step by step, show your work, and have one step per line. So let me run that as well. So now I have my priming text, I have my question, and I have my decorator. So now when I want to get my prompt, I just want to do string formatting. So string formatting in Python is going to work a little bit like this. So I'm going to say my prompt is the prompt template that I created up here, .format. My priming will be my priming text. So this will be replaced by the priming text. My question will be the question that I set up. So this will be replaced by this. And then finally, my decorator will be this one. So my prompt ends up becoming all of these things. And if I run it, now my prompt is set up. And if I want to print that prompt, just so I can see what it looks like, I can do so and run that. And we can now see that, I'm saying you're an expert at writing clear, concise Python code, create a doubly linked list, work through it step by step, one step per line, your solution's this. It's a little bit untidy with that extra space there. So you can also do things like, tidying it up here, or, I probably, because I have an extra space there, it's doing it. But that's going to be okay when you pass it to the model. The model's going to be perfectly okay with it. Let's give it a try. And I'm just going to do my usual. I'm going to specify that my completion is going to be generate text, pass it that prompt, and we can print out the result of that. We'll run that and it'll take a couple of seconds. And here's the output that we're getting. Now this is quite interesting. So I did ask it to create a doubly linked list. I did ask it to, and it's given me what appears to be a doubly linked list. We could check through this and maybe write some test cases if we wanted to explore it. But I did ask it to work through it step by step and show my work one step per line. Now, this is probably not the best prompt for something like this. This almost looks like a decorator that you would do if you were asking it to solve some kind of a puzzle or something along those lines. But let's think about something that's more appropriate for coding. So instead of saying work through it step by step and show your work, one step per line, how about we do something like insert comments for each line of code. So if I change my decorator to be that now, which is something that's a little bit more appropriate for coding, I recreate my prompt, I print my prompt. You can see now that my decorator is insert comments for each line of code. Now I'll get my completion. Let's see what it gives me. And now we're getting some comments, right? We have a node and a doubly linked list. We have initialized the node with the given data. Here the class doubly linked list has the comment doubly linked list, etc., etc. So this is looking a little bit better because I was much more explicit and I was much more specific with my prompt. Often when we do decorators, we're not really thinking in terms of like being a coder or something along those lines. It seemed to make perfect sense when we said work through it step by step and show your work. But that's not really what would happen when something is creating code. Like I said, that would be something if it's solving a puzzle, right? It can prove how it solved that puzzle. So that's always something to watch out for when you're creating your prompts. And what's nice about templating one like this is that you can still keep the main parts of the prompt without changing them. All I had to do in this case was change the decorator. And it might be fun to like come up with different decorators that you want to do, or just get it to create different things and split them up this way. But we can see that output of that code is happening now. Should we try a more sophisticated scenario? What do you say? So I'm going to create a new question. So create a very large list of random numbers in Python, and then write code to sort that list. Classic computer science problem. This one is completely unrehearsed, so hopefully it's going to work. So that's my new question. So I'm going to keep the same priming text and decorator. So all I need to do now is create a new prompt. So let me create that new prompt with Command C. I'll come back, I will run that. I will print my prompt. I speak in a rhyme. Okay, so we can see now you're an expert at writing clear, concise Python code. Create a very large list of random numbers in Python and write code to sort that list. Insert comments for each line of code. What is your solution? And now all I have to do is generate the completion and print it out. So again, it's the same code as before. Completion equals generate text for that prompt. The prompt now reads as this, and then print the result. So drum roll as I run it, and let's see what we get. Okay, well, that was pretty fast, and it gave us lots of stuff. So first of all, random numbers equals random randit 0 to 100 for blank and range up to 100,000, right? So that has now given me a list of random numbers. And let me try that. If I were to copy that code, that Python code in my notebook and run it, what's random numbers going to look like? You know, print, hopefully it doesn't break the notebook. Run it. Whoops. Oh, random is not defined because I haven't imported random yet. So let's see, is random supported? Okay, now I have it. Print random numbers. We got this huge list of random numbers that it's going to blow up the memory, and everybody in deep learning is going to be really unhappy with me. So let me go back to that. There's 100,000 numbers being printed here, but we can see the generated code has worked, but I'm going to delete this cell before it eats all the memory in the virtual machine. So let me delete that. So we can see that that actually worked. So that was creating the random numbers, and sorted numbers equals sorted random numbers. Well, I don't know what this sorted is. Okay, I know some Python, there's probably something in there. There's an imported function that it's being able to take in. And this gives me the ability to go out and try and find that and to look that up. And probably if I try to run it now, nothing will happen. And there's a library that I need to import. But let's see. So if I run that, and this is the fun of doing this kind of thing where you can experiment with these by yourself. And if I say print sorted numbers, does it work? Ooh, that's numbers. If I say print sorted numbers, it actually worked. So sorted as a dependency was already included in this notebook. And we can see my 100,000 numbers have actually been sorted. Doesn't that look great? And the code actually worked, believe it or not. So this is just a great example. Like, okay, the output code was much smarter. Instead of printing them all, it was just printing the first 10. But again, the explanation is given to me because this is how I primed. You know, I told it it's an expert at writing clear, concise Python code. I gave it this complex task and I asked it to insert comments for each line of code. I think that's pretty cool. So again, as you're working on these things, these are how you can use a template to give yourself a better way of understanding how to create a prompt to be able to generate code. But what we're going to be doing in the next lesson is we're going to be taking some really interesting coding scenarios. And in those coding scenarios, we're going to see how to take existing code and make it better using a large language model.